Have you ever noticed that some people only show their true interest when you pull away? It's a strange dynamic, but it's very real, especially when dealing with someone who is avoidant. Avoidants are often emotionally distant, guarded, and tend to retreat when things get too close. The moment you stop chasing, the moment you reclaim your energy and your boundaries, something magical happens. You shift from being a participant in their game to being the one in control of your life and your emotions. When you're always available, you become predictable. They know exactly when to pull back and when to return. You give them comfort, but rarely challenge them. And while that may feel safe for them, it keeps you stuck in a cycle of frustration and longing. But the moment you step away and make yourself unavailable, it forces them to confront their own feelings. Suddenly, they notice your absence. Suddenly, the dynamic changes. Suddenly, they may realize what they're missing. But by then, you're no longer waiting, you're living. The truth is, availability is a form of power. When you're constantly accessible, you give away your power. When you set boundaries, honor your own needs, and prioritize your life, you stop being a doormat and start being magnetic. You're no longer chasing validation, you're living your life fully. And in doing so, you often trigger reflection in the avoidant. Sometimes they come closer, sometimes they walk away. Either way, you win because you've reclaimed yourself. It's not about playing games. It's about respect for yourself and for your energy. It's about showing that you are whole and complete on your own. It's about teaching others how to value you by valuing yourself first. Everything changes the moment you are no longer available, not because you are punishing anyone, but because you are finally honoring your own life, your own desires, and your own boundaries. So, if you've been caught in the cycle of chasing someone emotionally distant, take a step back, focus on yourself, show up in the world as the person you are meant to be, not as a shadow waiting for someone to notice you. The power of unavailability is transformative, and it doesn't just affect the avoidant, it transforms you. Being constantly available to an avoidant can feel like an act of love or loyalty, but in reality, it often reinforces the very patterns that keep you stuck in frustration and emotional imbalance. Avoidant individuals are wired to protect themselves from intimacy, and when someone is always accessible, it creates a sense of comfort that allows them to remain distant without facing any consequences. By always showing up, responding immediately, or being overly accommodating to their needs, you are unintentionally teaching them that your presence is guaranteed, and therefore they don't need to invest emotionally. This dynamic can lead to a cycle where you are giving more than you are receiving, chasing validation that will never fully materialize, and feeling increasingly drained as a result. Your availability, rather than drawing them closer in a meaningful way, actually maintains the emotional gap between you. It is also important to recognize how availability affects perception. When someone is always present, they are often taken for granted, even by those who care about you. Avoidants, in particular, interpret constant access as a lack of boundaries or independence, which can reduce attraction over time. They may not consciously think, "I'm taking them for granted," but their behavior will naturally reflect the fact that there is no urgency or challenge in the connection. This is why relationships with avoidance can feel like walking on a treadmill. Constant effort on your part, but very little forward movement or deepening of connection on theirs. Being available without limit signals that your emotional state revolves around their choices, which unintentionally shifts power away from you and toward them. Availability also impacts your own energy and sense of self. When your focus is continually on accommodating an avoidant person, it can lead to emotional exhaustion, frustration, and even self-doubt. You may find yourself constantly monitoring their reactions, overanalyzing their behavior, or compromising your own needs to maintain the connection. This pattern not only reinforces the avoidance distance, but also erodes your self-esteem because you begin to equate your worth with their engagement. The more you make yourself available, the less you are prioritizing your own growth, happiness, and boundaries, which ironically is what would make you genuinely magnetic in their eyes. On the other hand, when you start to limit availability in a healthy, intentional way, it shifts the dynamic dramatically. By not being instantly reachable or endlessly accommodating, you introduce an element of self-respect and independence. This change forces the avoidant to confront the reality that you have your own life, priorities, and energy, and that your presence is not something they can take for granted. The absence of constant availability can spark reflection, curiosity, and sometimes even a desire to engage more meaningfully. In essence, stepping back isn't about punishing or manipulating, it's about reclaiming your energy and teaching the other person that a relationship is a two-way street, not a one-sided chase. Availability is a subtle but powerful factor in relationships with avoidance. By examining how much you give, how often you respond, and how willing you are to sacrifice your needs for theirs, you gain insight into the emotional patterns at play. Shifting this balance through healthy boundaries transforms the connection, not by changing them, but by changing how you show up. It's a step toward reclaiming your emotional power, reinforcing self-respect and creating the possibility for a healthier, more balanced dynamic. Setting boundaries is one of the most transformative actions you can take when dealing with someone who is avoidant, and it often feels counterintuitive at first. Many people believe that being flexible, always available, and accommodating will keep a relationship safe and stable. The truth is, the opposite is usually what happens. Avoidants are naturally inclined to retreat when they feel pressured or when intimacy feels overwhelming. When you fail to set limits, they don't experience any consequences for their distance or emotional withdrawal. By clearly defining what you will and will not accept, you send a powerful signal that your energy, time, and emotions are not negotiable. Boundaries are not walls. They are markers of respect for yourself and for the relationship, and they create an environment in which real connection can grow. Boundaries also have the power to shift perception. When you enforce them consistently, you demonstrate that you are independent, self-aware, and emotionally healthy. Avoidants are drawn to these qualities because they signal strength without aggression and security without dependency. When someone is constantly pliable or overly available, they can become predictable and uninteresting. But when boundaries are in place, your behavior becomes anchored in purpose rather than reaction. You are no longer orbiting around their needs, anxieties, or moods. You are operating from your own center. This change in energy can be magnetic. The avoidant starts to notice that you are not simply an extension of their world, but a full, autonomous person with your own standards and expectations. This awareness often compels them to engage more consciously, because your presence is now tied to intentional choice rather than automatic access. Another important aspect of boundaries is their role in protecting your emotional health. When you are clear about what is acceptable and what is not, you prevent the emotional erosion that comes from constant compromise or overextension. Avoidance can be inconsistent, hot and cold, or distant at times, and if you do not establish limits, it can lead to chronic stress, self-doubt, and even resentment. By setting boundaries, you reclaim control over your emotional space. You create a structure in which you are responsible for your own well-being rather than allowing someone else's avoidance patterns to dictate your moods or decisions. This clarity is not only empowering for you, but also provides a framework for the avoidant to engage in the relationship more thoughtfully rather than reacting impulsively to your availability. Boundaries are also a form of communication. They show that you value yourself, and by extension, you value the relationship enough to protect its integrity. Saying no to constant texts, resisting the urge to always be available, or expressing your emotional needs directly communicates that the relationship is a two-way street. It forces the avoidant to reckon with their own behavior and consider how their actions affect others. While this may initially create discomfort or tension, it is a necessary step toward a healthier dynamic. Avoidants are more likely to step up and show consistency when they see that their partner will not simply tolerate distance or emotional withdrawal without response. Ultimately, boundaries are transformative because they shift the power dynamic from one of chasing and giving to one of mutual respect and intentional engagement. They allow you to honor your own needs, protect your emotional energy, and cultivate relationships that are more balanced, meaningful, and sustainable. By setting limits, you are not only teaching others how to treat you, but also reinforcing your own self-worth in a way that becomes impossible to ignore. Reclaiming your independence and prioritizing your own life is one of the most powerful ways to shift any dynamic with an avoidant. Avoidants are often drawn to people who seem self-sufficient, but when someone becomes overly available, their interest can diminish because the connection feels one-sided. Independence is not about withdrawing for the sake of punishment. It's about showing that your life, your happiness, and your growth are not dependent on someone else's approval or engagement. When you focus on your own goals, passions, and friendships, you create a sense of fulfillment that cannot be shaken by someone else's emotional distance. This shift in energy is noticeable even to an avoidant because it communicates that you are complete and whole on your own, not a source of validation waiting to be tapped. When you reclaim your independence, you stop living reactively. Instead of constantly monitoring the avoidance behavior or adjusting your schedule and emotions to accommodate them, you begin to operate from your own priorities. This mindset allows you to invest in activities and relationships that energize you rather than drain you. You naturally become more confident because your sense of self-worth is no longer tied to how much attention or affection you receive. Avoidants are often triggered by dependency, neediness, or excessive availability, so aiming your independence changes the rules of engagement. Suddenly, they cannot predict your reactions, and this unpredictability creates a subtle tension that often draws them closer. They may not even understand why, but the dynamic has shifted, and that shift is powered by your focus on yourself rather than on trying to manage or control them. Prioritizing your own life also means embracing your passions and setting clear goals outside of the relationship. When an avoidant sees that your world is rich, full, and rewarding without constant attention to them, it creates a natural magnetism. They begin to recognize that your value exists independently of them, which can awaken both curiosity and respect. This is not about creating scarcity or playing games. It's about living authentically. Avoidants are more likely to engage meaningfully with someone who brings completeness and confidence to the table, rather than someone who bends, sacrifices, or becomes emotionally available at every whim. Your independence is a reflection of your self-respect, and self-respect is inherently attractive. Another key aspect of reclaiming your energy is the emotional freedom it provides. When you stop prioritizing an avoidant's emotional availability over your own needs, you free yourself from frustration and resentment. You no longer measure your value by their engagement, which removes the emotional roller coaster, often associated with avoidant dynamics. Instead, you operate from a grounded sense of self, where your happiness is not contingent on anyone else's decisions or behavior. This shift in perspective is transformative because it changes how you respond to the avoidant. They are no longer the center of your universe, and your interactions with them become more intentional and less reactive. Ultimately, independence is about empowerment. By living a life that is full, purposeful, and anchored in your own growth, you reclaim your emotional power. You stop chasing someone else's validation and create the conditions for a healthier, more balanced dynamic. Avoidance may respond by stepping up, or they may step away. But either outcome is a victory because you have aligned your life with your own priorities and well-being. This reclaiming of independence is not just a strategy for dealing with avoidance. It is a profound way to honor yourself and cultivate relationships that reflect your true worth. Recognizing and honoring your self-worth before seeking validation from others is one of the most crucial steps in transforming any relationship with an avoidant. Too often, people fall into the trap of measuring their value by how much attention, affection, or emotional engagement they receive from someone else. With avoidance, this pattern is particularly dangerous because they are naturally distant, independent, and sometimes inconsistent in their expressions of care. When you allow your self-esteem to hinge on their behavior, you inadvertently give them control over your emotions, creating a cycle of insecurity, longing, and frustration. By internalizing your self-worth and affirming that your value is inherent, not dependent on external validation, you break this cycle and reclaim emotional sovereignty. Understanding your self-worth means acknowledging that you are complete and worthy of love and respect, regardless of how others respond. It requires shifting the focus inward, asking yourself what you need, what you deserve, and how you can fulfill those needs without relying on someone else to meet them. This does not mean becoming cold, distant, or disconnected from others. It means being grounded in your own identity and refusing to compromise your well-being to gain approval or attention. Avoidants are often drawn to people who are emotional, available but self-assured. And your recognition of your own value communicates strength and stability in a way that is both magnetic and healthy. When you act from a place of self-worth, your energy shifts from chasing to attracting, and the dynamic with an avoidant begins to balance. Self-worth also transforms your decision-making. When you know your value, you are less likely to tolerate behaviors that undermine your emotional health. You are able to set and enforce boundaries, communicate your needs clearly, and disengage from patterns of pursuit or over-accommodation. This not only protects you from unnecessary stress, but also signals to the avoidant that you will not settle for a one-sided connection. Your consistency and clarity communicate respect for yourself, which often compels them to engage more consciously if they wish to maintain the relationship. In this way, self-worth is not passive. It actively shapes the interactions and expectations within the dynamic. Furthermore, cultivating self-worth provides a foundation for resilience. Avoidance can be unpredictable, and their emotional distance can sometimes trigger doubt or anxiety in others. By anchoring your sense of value internally, you create a buffer against these fluctuations. You no longer feel compelled to chase or negotiate for attention because your confidence is not contingent upon their responses. This emotional stability makes you more attractive and grounded, and it also allows you to make choices that are aligned with your long-term happiness rather than immediate emotional gratification. Ultimately, valuing yourself before seeking validation is about empowerment and liberation. It allows you to interact with avoidance or anyone in a way that is intentional, grounded, and authentic. You are no longer at the mercy of someone else's engagement. Instead, you operate from a place of strength. GTH and clarity. This shift transforms the relationship dynamic and, more importantly, transforms you. When you prioritize self-worth over external validation, you create the conditions for healthier, more balanced, and mutually respectful connections while cultivating a sense of personal fulfillment that cannot be shaken by anyone else's behavior. Stepping back and becoming intentionally unavailable is one of the most powerful tools you can use to transform a relationship with an avoidant. And it works not through manipulation, but through self-empowerment. Many people fear unavailability because it feels like rejection or distance. But in reality, it is a way to reclaim your time, energy, and emotional power. Avoidants are wired to pull back when intimacy feels overwhelming, and when you are constantly present and accommodating, it allows them to maintain their emotional distance without consequence. By choosing to be unavailable in a healthy and deliberate way, you create a shift in the dynamic, forcing them to recognize your value and presence rather than taking it for granted. Unavailability teaches the avoidant that a relationship is not a one-sided endeavor. When you are always accessible, they can drift in and out of connection without feeling pressure to invest. This often leads to frustration, disappointment, and a sense of imbalance on your side. By setting limits on your availability, whether through time, attention, or emotional energy, you introduce a natural structure that demands conscious engagement. This is not about playing games or punishing someone. It is about demonstrating that your life, priorities, and well-being are important. When an avoidant sees that they cannot simply take your presence for granted, they are often compelled to step up and show consideration in ways they may not have previously. Intentional unavailability also fosters a sense of independence and self-respect. It allows you to prioritize your own goals, relationships, and personal growth without being consumed by the unpredictable behavior of someone else. This creates a powerful magnetic energy because it communicates that you are complete on your own. Avoidants are drawn to individuals who are grounded, confident, and self-sufficient. When you operate from a place of wholeness rather than neediness, the dynamic naturally shifts. You are no longer chasing validation or attention, but instead engaging in the relationship from a position of strength, where your emotional state is not contingent on their actions or approval. Another critical aspect of unavailability is that it encourages reflection. When you are no longer immediately accessible, an avoidant is forced to confront the reality of their own behavior. They may start to notice the ways in which they have taken you for granted, or they may begin to consider whether they want to engage more meaningfully. This reflection often leads to more intentional communication and emotional presence on their part. Even if they do not respond as you hope, the act of stepping back is still a victory because you have prioritized your own boundaries and energy over the uncertainty of their engagement. Finally, unavailability is transformative because it creates clarity. It separates those who are willing to meet you halfway from those who are not, allowing you to focus your time and energy on connections that are mutually respectful and fulfilling. It is a form of self-honor, teaching both yourself and the avoidant that relationships require effort, presence, and emotional investment from both sides. By stepping back, you do not lose control. You reclaim it, creating the conditions for healthier interactions, while strengthening your own sense of self-worth and empowerment. In conclusion, reclaiming your time, energy, and emotional power is not about punishing anyone. It's about honoring yourself, setting boundaries, and living a life that reflects your true worth. By becoming intentionally unavailable, prioritizing your independence, and valuing yourself before seeking validation, you transform not only the dynamic with an avoidant, but also your own sense of confidence and fulfillment. Remember, the most magnetic and meaningful connections come from a place of self-respect, authenticity, and balance. Thank you all for giving me the opportunity to share these insights today, and I hope you leave inspired to step into your own power and create relationships that truly honor who you are.